Okay, so tell me, did you stay up until midnight?
So I think this is the new best way to celebrate New Year's is with kids.
Yes.
We're a married couple. We both work together here at Tricord Advisors. We also have 4 kids together.
Yes.
And part of what we did this year is we hung with some other friends, and at 9 o'clock, so midnight East Coast time,
we logged into YouTube Live so we could watch the New York ball drop at 9 p.m. West Coast time.
Yeah, and our kids with other friends, they had a dance party. We played minute to win it type games.
Goodness.
We had so much fun. And then by 9:40,
Yeah.
we were done. We got kids ready for
It's
bed.
that. I don't even know
And
that
then turned on the movie, and the heads slowly started going down. And we had one kid that stayed up till actual midnight West Coast time.
I think my favorite. Okay, what was your favorite minute to win it game? Because I wanted my.
I think there's one where they put bows all over the ground,
Okay.
and everyone had to get them
Like
on their body. without
Christmas
using their hands.
bows turned upside down,
Yes.
so the sticky side is up.
Yeah, so when they said go, all the kids and adults dove into the middle, rolling about, trying to
Yeah.
get these bows to stick to their body.
Yeah, the goal was get as many bows
Yeah.
to stick to your body.
What was your favorite?
My favorite was it's a classic game. This time, I've always seen it used with Oreo cookies, but this time we used the good old circus animal
Oh, yeah.
cookies. And it starts out on your forehead, but you can't use your hands, and you have to move it down your face.
Right.
That one had really good video
Right.
clips.
What all the kids?
We'll include those in
try
the
to-
show notes
No.
after. No, I'm kidding.
As we jump in here, this is Building Wealthy Habits by Tricord Advisors. I'm Jeremiah Lee. This is Laura Lee. We're both certified financial planners. I'm also a California licensed attorney. And each week we get together with Randy Barkley when he's here at times. We talk through life's difficult financial questions. We try and help our clients as well as the listening audience make smart decisions with their money. And today we're talking about a little bit of a harder topic, but it's one that is so valuable and we run into over and over again. We call it survivors. It's someone who has lost either a spouse or someone who has lost a parent, but someone who's walking into a new financial position that they hadn't before. Sometimes it could be widows or widowers. We like to call them just survivors, people who are in a new spot. And there's a lot of questions that come about. There's a lot of emotions in this time season. It's for sure a transition. And we have the honor of walking through this with many of our clients, some that are brand new to us and they have no preparation, some that have been clients for years and are set up for a smooth transition. But that's what we're going to be talking about today.
We're going to talk about a couple testimonials, specific experiences that we've had with clients that found themselves arriving in a situation where they'd lost a spouse in both case scenarios, but had come to that point in their life in 2 very different ways, and kind of the things that they were dealing with in the moment. Some things were similar and some things were very different. So we want to talk through those scenarios as well as just provide a checklist that we walk through. Our goal is, our desire is to be helpful with some of these items, especially when you arrive at that point and kind of don't know what to do. But before we dive into the details, I kind of want to frame the circumstance that we find this season, 2024, this era, I guess, when we talk about widows and survivors. We've got the largest population ever, the baby boomers, moving into retirement, and they might be the highest likelihood for this widow population. We've got 76 million baby boomers starting to step into that season of life. And in general, not always the case, but in general, we're seeing women outlive men by a few years. So the proportion of female widows compared to male widows is starting to increase. Again, it's not always the case, but these are kind of some statistics to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a shift of wealth or managing finances to female baby boomers. And again, that's not always the case, but it's a trend and it's something to take note of. And certainly we think about it as we're preparing how to talk to survivors about this next season of their life.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a number of those, just an example of this, the general being women who have been running the finances for years. This is a very normal thing for them. They're used to making these decisions. There's also a number of them who the husband in the relationship, he ran all the finances and was the primary one to do investments or to know where all the different accounts were and how to get into them and pays the bills. Every family is different of how they sort this out, but often it's the survivor, whoever it is in the family, is often taking on more roles and more responsibility. Even if it was a great teamwork type dynamic, they're now potentially alone in that, is what they may feel.
Right.
So often there's feelings of course, sadness at the loss. That's the first feeling. But then next to that often comes this feeling of being overwhelmed, of I have to make all these decisions on my own. Sometimes there's even embarrassment of I don't actually know how to log into this account.
I thought I knew, but maybe I don't.
We've got a lot of spouses who are using their deceased spouse's phone still because that was the only login to a certain investment. These aren't uncommon items. And those emotions, we want to take someone from feeling vulnerable, embarrassed, overwhelmed, to feeling confident and having this new almost blossoming of their own voice and their own control of their finances, knowing they're not alone. And that's part of what we add is coming alongside someone in that moment. But that initial start to this, I think there's just as much as emotions as there is creating some momentum and some checklists to know, hey, I'm taking the reins here. I'm taking charge of this. And I think both have to be dealt with.
Yeah, I think there is automatically a lot of questions, and the spouse or the widow is often looked to for all the answers. And that can be a time that is very overwhelming. And I think for the widow, it's important to know that it's okay for them to ask questions too. It's okay for them not to know the answers. In most cases, this is the first time they've been in that situation of life. And I know even for myself, sometimes I'm challenged at knowing all the details. For example, you may know what banks you use as a couple, or what financial planner you've worked with, but do you have the password to get into the account? There's a lot of details and there's a lot of questions. So I think the first step we want to take is just kind of an emotional connection with them to check in. It is a moment with a lot of emotions, not just sadness, but also these feelings of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think a good comment for anybody, male or female, but before they get to this point, if they have a financial professional in their house and in their life, a CPA, an attorney, a financial advisor.
Yeah, probably not in their house.
Sorry, in their life. Yeah, not in their house. In their life, man, it is so valuable to engage with that person, to listen at meetings, to ask all the questions you have. We've had a number of folks who one will pass away or not be there, and the surviving spouse will say, hey, I was in those meetings, but I wasn't really understanding, or I know you were talking with my spouse and you guys kind of had this connection and I just went along with it.
Maybe I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't paying attention. And then there's a level of embarrassment perhaps, but also that relationship that is so valuable to build. I mean, going to your financial advisor should not feel like going to the dentist and, I'm going to have to do this. It should feel like the goals that you have, the visions that you have, you should leave there feeling there's wind in your sails. Like, we're going to make it. We have a goal. We're going to get there. We know what to do, versus, someone who says, you need to spend less and you need to save more, if you don't have that person, you need to find that person, I think for both spouses, someone that you can relate to, because statistically, as we're talking through here, if the male in the family is going to pass away, that means that the spouse, that's the woman, she's likely going to continue that relationship after that death as a survivor. And that needs to be a trusted relationship that you have. And if you don't have it, now's the time to start building that.
And let's even talk, because you started the conversation regarding not just widows in terms of the loss of a spouse, but it could be the loss of a parent. And so actually knowing who your parents consult for professional services, I guess, is a broad bucket. So CPA, attorney, and specifically financial advisor, because more often than not in a situation like this, each one of them provides a specific benefit after the loss of an individual. But financial advisor can oftentimes act like a quarterback and typically have access to the accounts, and so help provide kind of immediate liquidity or finances for those expenses that'll come up right away. So it's not just about knowing where you and your partner do financing and all those kind of things, but also maybe for your parents as well.
That's a great comment. The emotions aren't, sometimes they're very different, but often they're very similar. I had a client not too long ago that her father had passed away, and she inherited a fairly large account from him, but felt adrift with this newfound responsibility, almost felt overwhelmed to do anything with the money, because whenever she thought of the money, it was thinking about her father who had passed away, but then also didn't feel that she knew what to do with it. She didn't feel that she had that level of sophistication to understand what was appropriate. So we worked with her, we began working with her, and that money, before she was working with us, that money had sat in a savings account for well over a year. And so when she came in, I kind of illustrate a little bit like, had this been invested, this is the growth it would have had versus, at that time banks were paying very little. And again, and this was the point of the discussion, but another wave of embarrassment came over to say, now I'm being a poor steward of this great gift my father gave me. And in that, we were able to work through the emotions with her to say, like, she has the power, she can have the confidence to honor him through moving forward. And she doesn't have to figure it out by herself. That's what we're here for, to come alongside and to, be the we always joke that each individual, they're the superhero of the story. Yeah. We're here to give them a cape or give them a rocket pack and help them do all the things that they can do. And so for her, she began investing. She began asking great questions. She grew in confidence. And that was an example of someone who their father had passed away. And it was the last parent that was still surviving. So she was the survivor here now. And she was taking on these assets that she didn't feel equipped to manage by herself. And through effort and time and education, she now feels she has a support, she has an ally, and able to move forward.
So let's move into kind of what the next steps are. So if you are a listener or someone in your life that is walking through this or even preparing themselves, I think all of us can take some tidbits from some of the details that we're going to share. So let's talk through a couple different scenarios. We're going to use a couple sort of testimonials from clients that we have to offer some guidance. I think we've already touched on the fact that there can be a whole just host of emotions that come in that season. And so the first step is don't panic and find some trusted advisors. But what are some of the next steps in terms of a checklist?
Yeah, and don't panic, I think, is a great first one. When someone passes away, there's nothing that has to be done immediately. People always assume I gotta do this, I gotta notify people, and yes, that has to happen eventually. But the first order of business is grieving, is caring for yourself, caring for your family members. And often that first step is getting death certificates. And that goes through the undertaking process, the mortuary that you work with. They will help order from the county those death certificates. You usually need 6 to 10, but often you can't do anything. You can't notify anybody until you get those death certificates. So for a lot of our clients, we'll have them put in that order with the mortuary they're working with, and then work on the emotions, deal with their family, honor their spouse or their parent who's passed away. But that's step one, and everything else is going to lead off of that. And just as a comment, we don't do this blindly. We don't just walk in and say, like a shotgun shooting from the hip. We have a structured checklist that we go through. And if anyone is in this space, we're happy to connect with you or even just share our checklist with you of the items that are going to need to happen and kind of the order they need to happen in. And so the first one is don't panic, focus on grieving and celebrating, that person. And then, as you order those death certificates, you basically have to wait a little bit until you receive them.
Naturally step into some of the funeral arrangements. And then you said it's just important to note that as you communicate with the mortuary to go ahead and get several copies of a death certificate, minimum of 6, but maybe even 10 may not be excessive, depending on how many entities you have to notify of the loss of this loved one.
And part of what comes next, and the reason you need these, is if you have, say, a life insurance policy, they're going to require a death certificate. If there is an annuity, they'll need a death certificate. If there's a retirement account, they're going to need a death certificate. So there's a number of these death certificates. So they're going to go together with some claim or some transfer paperwork, and they're going to be sent off to the various institutions. And so someone who had 4 or 5 different life insurance policies is going to need 4 or 5 death certificates just for that one aspect of their life.
Yeah, like certified copies. And to move on, I think that one of the next things that we want to look at is what the immediate financial needs are. So there's a lot of expense that goes into funeral arrangements. There might be some sort of reception or event thereafter. You might be having out of town family members come in. You know, there's a lot of expense that can come around the loss of a loved one. So then the next step would be determining kind of the daily expenses, the recurring monthly expenses. What are the liquidity needs that the survivor might have to make sure that you have access to the accounts, access to the cash as needed? That's one of really the next primary things.
I agree. Yeah. And that as we go through that initial planning, if it's been a client for a while, then we know where the accounts are. We know where the assets are. We already have a good sense of what their spending is. So it's pretty easy for an existing client for us to say, all right, the next 3 months, you probably need to have X amount of dollars available. It probably needs to be in this account because you have access to that account. And okay, you have plenty of money now. Let's work on the longer term thoughts. But for people who are new to us, or someone who they just had the loss of a spouse or a loss of a loved one, and they are coming in brand new, we have to do a little bit of investigation with them to say, where is the money? How do you get to it? How do you usually spend? Where is it located? And the hard part for us when it's a new client is we don't have control over any of that, of getting money moved around and transferred. It often takes a little bit of a time to get new accounts set up, money moved around. And that's the benefit of doing this early, of someone who can make a relationship with an advisor that you trust, get your life organized in a financial sense so that someone that can, like us, that can deal with the finances has access to them to move them appropriately. And then that each spouse has access to either a checking account or whatever they may need.
So this next item, I think is really where we want to highlight kind of two scenarios. Someone that maybe we've worked with ahead of time, but we have knowledge of their accounts. We have knowledge of how assets are titled. We have knowledge of their liquidity needs, et cetera, et cetera. Things can move along more quickly because one of the things that will happen after the death of a loved one is there's some natural tax steps and tax ramifications that come into play. The estate of that individual has to be settled. And with your legal background, I'm sure you can provide some details there, but maybe compare the difference between someone who has had the proper titling and someone who maybe has not.
Yeah. So we'll give examples. So one of our clients we worked with her and her husband for a number of years. They had life insurance. They had a number of real estate properties. They had investment accounts, and some retirement accounts. There's even a little bit of corporate profit sharing and stock that they held. So all these different assets. And having worked with them for a while, the real estate was all in their family trust. The life insurance was in the name of the surviving spouse, whichever way it was going to go. And so in the moment of the husband passed away, and so the wife came in, and we were able to jump very quickly into the emotions of it because we knew she's going to file for the life insurance and there's going to be plenty of cash in the estate. There's going to be plenty of money that's going to flow to her that she'll be able to pay bills. She won't have to worry about a tight budget or being concerned. That there was a nice breath of fresh air. The life insurance did that as an infusion of cash. All the real estate, we knew that it didn't need to go through probate. It didn't need to have any sort of immediate needs. Any immediate needs, it was already in the trust. It was already there. And so the moment that the husband passed away, they went from having 2 trustees to just 1 trustee. And so no transfers, no court proceedings, nothing needed to happen. And so in that pre-planning, that structuring, those 2 key items were pretty significant, that the real estate didn't have to go through probate, didn't have to go through court proceedings, and the cash through life insurance made this nice buffer of liquidity.
And just quickly remind our listeners, what is probate?
Probate.
What do people think about when they think about probate?
Yeah, often I would talk a lot that probate's kind of like the DMV. If you like the DMV, you're going to love probate. There's long lines, it's public, there's a lot of rules. Just the DMV is very important, so is probate. But it's a long process. Often people will hire an attorney to walk them through. It can take 6 months to a year. Even if there's no fighting, it just takes a while. And in California, it changes every year, but it's roughly $160,000 of assets that are outside of a trust that's going to trigger probate. So if you own real estate in your own personal name in California, almost everyone, that's going to trigger probate. And what happens is the person who's passed away, there's no one left to sign the deed. And so they kind of look around, who can sign this, and they have to go to a judge, and the judge has to determine who the best person is. And the whole process is called probate.
It's going to take months,
yeah.
if not years,
yeah.
depending on how complex the estate is.
That's right.
So.
If you have two spouses who are married and own things as joint tenants, which is very common, it's not that difficult between the two spouses. However, if you try and pass from a parent generation to a child generation, it's extremely difficult, and you're likely going to be into probate. So those are the other thing that's really interesting in death is the tax aspect of this. So probate is kind of the operation, but the tax side, for someone who had, say, a rental property, real estate that was a rental they've had for 20 years, and they knew that in the life of both spouses, if they were to sell it, they would have all these capital gains that they're going to pay taxes on. So because of that, the family said, oh, we'll never sell that. There's just too much taxes associated with it. In California, we're a community property state, and if there's a husband and wife that both own real estate, if one of them were to pass away, the cost basis of where they bought it years ago compared to the fair market value, that's your taxable amount, the difference, that cost basis gets stepped all the way up to the current fair market value. And so a lot of those taxes just disappear. There's only a couple of times in the tax code where it's not just that taxes are delayed, but they actually dissolve and disappear.
So it's a benefit.
And this is one of them, yeah. And Congress and other people look at this on a regular basis. So we're always seeing what Congress is kind of trying to change. But currently, there's this great change in tax footing, and it applies to real estate. It also applies to stocks. So there's a number of people who maybe say they bought Apple 20 years ago. They've had it for years, and
Lucky
never.
them.
Yeah, that's right. And they've never sold it. They've just held on to it. And now, as you have a surviving spouse taking over some of these assets, there's a sentiment of, I don't want to change anything because this is what my spouse and I put together, or they were the financial person. This is what they picked.
Right.
But in that moment of death, as they walk over, there's no timer and there's no rush. But the tax position has changed meaningfully. And so what would have been a good choice maybe a month ago when both were living, now that one has passed away, some of these assets, because the tax position has changed, a lot of those taxes has dissolved, changing some portfolios, selling some real estate, all that becomes a different conversation than it was before. And that's part of that this whole process of someone not just knowing where the access is and knowing how to get into checking. That's step one. But as you move forward to really taking on ownership of those assets and saying, I'm in control here. This is different than it was when my spouse and I were together. I am now, I have the responsibility, but two, I have different opportunities here because of the death. And it's a real key moment for taxes that it's very complex. It's quite complex. I would not encourage anyone to do this alone, but to walk through this with a CPA, a financial advisor, even an attorney, to walk through it with them to say, okay, how have things changed? What are some of the best choices for me now? As I look forward to their life.
So unfortunately, we are running out of time. There is a lot of information here, and we might even have to do another episode and kind of diving into sort of estate tax planning and the details there. So if you as a listener have any specific questions, please contact us. You can go to our website, tricordadvisors.com. Again, we're here to serve our clients, to walk them through life's difficult situations as well as life's successes as well. So we like to say that we are your future's best ally. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Building Wealthy Habits, and we thank you for listening.